So here we are again. Sarah Garton, Director of Accenture UK, thank you very much for joining us. Jesse, thank you as well. I'm going to jump straight into it today, guys. Sarah, I've heard a podcast with you on. I've heard your story. Would you mind telling our listeners your story?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. I'm delighted to be here. So my story, 7, maybe 8 years ago, I was at pretty much the height of my career. I'd just been promoted into a senior director role, and I'd worked really, really hard to get to this place throughout my 20 odd years at Accenture. But right at that moment when I probably should have been really thriving, something very unexpected began to happen to me. I'd be in the middle of client meetings, I'd lose my train of thought, my mind would go blank, I'd struggle to recall really simple details. And this would happen not just in meetings that were relatively informal, but in big important client pitches where you're trying to win some work. And whilst my mind was going blank, I'd have this unbearable wave of heat just like erupt from somewhere deep inside of me. And when you're standing in front of clients and colleagues, and it was just, I think it was because the heat just came on so suddenly, and it knocks you for six, and then your brain goes. So I just, I honestly felt after 2 or 3 times of this happening, didn't understand why it was happening, and I thought, I'm just falling apart. I then convinced myself I wasn't capable. And of course, having been recently promoted, I thought, this. Here we are. I've been over promoted. I've been promoted beyond my capability. And for months, I walked around with a resignation letter in my bag, ready to just hand it in the next time this thing happened to me. And that letter, I guess, became a bit of a symbol of the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, and to some extent the shame that I was living with. And then in 2019, there was a moment that changed everything. And I walked into a session called Smashing the Taboo. And it was all about, we didn't even use the word menopause on the advertising. It was just called Smashing the Taboo. And I walked into this room, it was full. There was about 100 people, together with a bunch of experts, including actually at the time, Dr. Louise Newsom, who I think you've talked about on a previous podcast, Lawrence. She, in 2019, she was running a clinic in Stratford-upon-Avon. Nobody had ever really heard of her. And we, paid her train fare and bought her a bunch of flowers. And she came along and talked, which, when I look back now, is quite incredible, given, what she does now. But she and other panelists started to talk about the impact of menopause, and they described the symptoms, the brain fog, the hot flushes, the sleepless nights, the loss of confidence. And I just sat there going, oh my God, they're not describing someone like me. They were actually describing me. And it hit me. It was a real moment that mattered, because I suddenly realized I wasn't failing. I wasn't broken. I was just a woman in her mid-40s who had stopped producing estrogen, and I was in menopause. And the other reason that this session was so life-changing was because there's the usual thing at the end of these things, put your hand up if you've got any questions. And I wanted to, I put my hand up and I stood up, and I opened my mouth to say something, sufficiently senior-ish, and, to thank the panel. And instead of something very senior-ish coming out of my mouth, the emotion poured out. I literally broke down. Tears, snot, the works. I was broken, because for months I had felt so isolated, like I was the only one that was going through this. And this session, this Smashing the Taboo session, all the way back in 2019, was just a moment, and it all came flooding out. And the room, there was no embarrassment, no judgment, nobody kind of going, oh my God, what's going on? Sarah's lost it. Because I didn't have a reputation for being someone that was particularly, emotional. The room wrapped its arms around me, and people came up to me afterwards and said, you're not useless. You're not alone. We understand. And in that moment, those months of isolation and the shame I spoke about earlier just went, they evaporated. And what I felt instead was this sense of belonging. And that feeling of belonging, I think, really, well, ultimately it saved my career. It probably saved my marriage, and it saved my relationship with my kids. It gave me back my confidence, and it sparked something much bigger. The birth of our own internal MenoWarrior movement, something that started off just in the UK and has now grown to many of our countries around the world. But for me personally, everything changed. I tore up the resignation letter. I embraced the right health and wellbeing strategies for me, and I stepped into a new version of myself, Sarah 2.0, if you like. I became stronger, fitter, more energized than I had been in the previous 25 years of my life. And then nearly 2 years ago now, gosh, time flies. 2 years ago, I even moved 5,000 miles away to India to lead a big major reinvention program on behalf of Accenture. And it's actually something, I could never have imagined having the self-confidence to do that back in 2019. So, and I think what matters most for this conversation is that men played a big role in that sense of belonging and me kind of fixing myself from day one. When I broke down in that room in London, it wasn't just women who supported me. Male colleagues were at that session. In fact, one male colleague was actually a sponsor of the session. And he told me, you're not a fraud, you're not alone. And their empathy dissolved any isolation that I was feeling. And that's why I think men are absolutely critical to this conversation. Whether you're a partner, a father, a brother, a colleague, a boss, it doesn't matter. Your understanding and support can change absolutely everything. So menopause once felt like the end of my career, but in truth, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one full of passion, purpose, and connection. And there's a quote that stayed with me throughout my journey, which is, just when the caterpillar thought the world was over, she became a butterfly. And that's exactly what menopause has been for me. Not an ending, but a real transformation.
Wow. That's amazing. What a story. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. And there's so much to unpack there. I almost don't even know where to begin. I mean, first of all, congratulations on MenoWarriors at Accenture.
Thank you.
Congratulations on how big that has become. Formally accredited, if I have that right,
yes,
as a menopause-friendly business within the UK.
Correct.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that men were a part of this as well. But I want to get into all of that. I know Lawrence does as well. But can we take a step back to the beginning and talk a little bit about where were you prior to, this coming out, prior, when you were feeling that shame, when you were feeling that grief, when you were feeling that isolation? How is it that you as a woman got into that place in the first place, right? How do women get into that place in the first place? Because I think when we talk about, especially men in companies, trying to understand what women are going through, it's one thing to understand the symptoms themselves, but it's another thing to understand why it's happening and how they got there. And because absent of the context, I think it's just trying to fix this one thing or fix that one thing. So I'd love just your take on the understanding of how women arrived at this place.
I mean, for me, it was, I consider myself to be a reasonably well-educated, well-informed, well-read individual. This was something nobody had prepared me for. Not my education, not school. My girlfriends weren't talking about it. My sisters weren't talking about it. My mother definitely didn't talk about it. But when I started to talk about it, when I started to realize what was going on and I could put names and labels and get myself educated and aware around it, and I talked to my mother, she was like, oh, yeah, that's why I stopped work at 50, whatever. But, I couldn't cope anymore. And then my sisters and I started to join the dots with some of the things that, some of the crazy that had gone on when we were teenagers with my mum. and and you're like, oh my God. And it's just because people don't talk. And that education isn't there. Even the doctors. So when I went to the doctors to say, I don't know what's going on, is this early onset dementia? I've got that in my family. Is that what this is? Oh, you're not sleeping and you're a little bit emotional and a bit anxious. Here's some sleeping tablets and some antidepressants. Off you go. And I was like, no. I think I'm not anxious, and I am anxious and depressed, but I'm not. There's no underlying root cause of that, other than something else is going on here. And it took a session at work to understand what I was going through. Crazy, just crazy.
Yeah, if I can pick up on that too, Sarah, and I really, thank you for being so honest and transparent with us. But as Jesse says, we try and go back to the root cause. We all know it's obviously the estrogen deficit, but as a woman, you start off, you're going through all these hormonal changes, your periods are changing, you feel your personality is changing, you look in the mirror, you're not recognizing yourself, your shadow of yourself, your self-doubt is down. But do you think, because our experience from speaking to younger ladies is that they have no clue about what they're facing, and you then start going to the doctor, and you go through, I don't know, I know with my wife it was a couple of years of change before she starts to understand herself.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So did you find the same thing? It wasn't instantaneous. You went
No,
through it.
it's not you wake up one day and it's a slow creep of a number of different things that you can have. I think there are like 32 or 35 different symptoms. And it wasn't till I was getting the hot flushes and the brain fog that I even started to connect dots. But there had been signs and signals before. Restless leg syndrome. Oh, yeah. Itchy skin. Just little things that gradually crept up. And because I think partly my challenge was I was in my early 40s when I was perimenopausal. So I just did not even, for me, yes, I'd heard of menopause, didn't know all the symptoms, but I hadn't even associated with it being something that could happen to somebody in their early 40s. And I'd certainly never heard of perimenopause. So to be in my early 40s and starting to go through some of these symptoms was a bit of a, I did not associate what I was going through until it got to the hot flush, and that, because those are the things that typically in the media that you hear about, right? You see these wonderful, not so wonderful cartoons of, grey-haired women with fans and stuff like that. The symptoms are way more varied than that. They vary by ethnicity, different things for different people. Some people don't have a hot flush. Some people have no symptoms at all. And that's why I think it's so hard to pin down. It's so hard to go, you are perimenopausal. But it's about joining dots together over a period of time. But you're right, Lawrence. It's not an overnight. You wake up one morning and go, and there's no nice, neat blood test and no nice test that you can take that confirms it one way or the other. The only time that you know that you are menopausal is when you have gone for a whole 12 months without a period. That's it. So you're actually menopausal for one day. All that time in the lead up is perimenopause, and then you're postmenopausal the day after your first day of 12 months without a period. And that's mind blowing, isn't it?
And so postmenopause. Sorry, Jess, if I can just say something on that, if you don't mind. But the one area that I get very frustrated with, Sarah, is I often speak to women who have said, I've had no symptoms. So I got through it. And I go, but you're not through it. Until the day you die, your body's changing. You haven't beaten the system. You are a woman. Every cell in your body is a woman. You've got you've been stripped of estrogen. The testosterone's down. Your bone density, everything is depleting. So even though you're not having symptoms, it doesn't mean you've escaped it.
No.
You haven't escaped it, and that's really frustrating for me.
It is frustrating because there's a lot of research now. I think it's Dr. Lisa Moscone is doing a lot of work around the impact of estrogen depletion on the brain, Alzheimer's, dementia. There's the obvious link to osteoporosis, and by not replacing that estrogen in some way, and I'm not advocating one way or the other for hormone replacement or hormone therapy, but if you don't do something and you're not aware, you are going to have health issues down the line.
I think it's important to, you brought up the hot flashes, and my sister just the other day, who's an ER doctor, who got no training in menopause, but and I actually had somebody once tell me, well, she's an ER doctor. And I said, where do you think women go when they're having heart palpitations and feeling like they're having a heart attack? And then they're being seen by doctors who, by their own admission, got, no training on this. And I think it's so important that men especially understand that menopause comes to the workplace. There's so much that we talk about that feels in a way that it's happening within the home.
Yeah.
It's happening in bed. The hot flashes are often at night. There's insomnia. There's nocturia. There's all these things. But you don't, I think a lot of men aren't connecting the fact that all of those things stay with her when she goes to the office, right? And this idea that your skin can raise temperature by 2 degrees, and that could be happening in an important, it's that feeling of hot lava bursting out of your chest. I think men just think it's like, oh, she's flushed. But no, this is an unbearable heat, like you described. And imagine that happening in these scenarios, like they have happened to you. And I was thinking about all this from the standpoint of, why does a company care? What is it that, or maybe let me phrase that as a question. How do we get companies to care? How do we get companies to understand the impact on the welfare of their employees, the impact on retention, the impact on the loss of productivity, the impact on the cost to the organization? How do we get that message to companies? And how did you do it?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the statistics are pretty shocking. Like 1 in 10 women consider quitting at what should be the peak of their career, and 1 in 4 actually do. I mean, what country can afford that kind of economic loss of really skilled, very experienced? It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. You cannot afford that level of dropout. That's crazy. So there is an there's an absolute economic business case for why companies should care about this. It's a really interesting one as you go around the world. I've, having worked in India, having got a lot of US colleagues and European colleagues, the way this is talked about in different geographies is really interesting. We struggled so much to get a MenoWarriors movement off the ground in the US. I can't even tell you. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to put their head above the parapet and go, I'm happy to lead this, until one day somebody was. And she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because she didn't care. She didn't care that it might mean, I think there was this fear of, just a fear of how people would be, how you'd be perceived. And it's an acknowledgement of getting older. And for whatever reason, and I don't pretend to understand it, but in the US, that seems to be a big deal. It's less so in Europe, in India, in Asia, it's a very different, people just don't talk about it. There's a lot of things that they don't talk about, especially menopause. But, to your point, I think companies have to sit up and take notice, because the talent and the brain drain and the opportunity loss of losing, we've been for many years, we've pushed the diversity agenda. I mean, you're never going to get to an equality in gender if you're hemorrhaging people at the top end. You just can't. You'll just never get that balance, right? So
we can't lose top talent, and I think it's really important to say this as well, Sarah. It's not just about the women in your organization, because if I work for you and I'm in a senior position, and my wife is going through hell at home, I'm bringing the home into the workplace because suddenly my sleep is disrupted, my head's not there, I'm anxious. What's happening to my wife? Am I going to lose her? Am I going to do, whatever it might be? I'm bringing this into the workplace. So there's very much, we as men are part of this conversation without a shadow of a
Oh,
doubt.
absolutely. We've had so many conversations, either one-on-one, confidential conversations with men who've just said, you've just opened my eyes to something I had no idea about, and I think this is what my wife is going through.
Mhm.
And can you help? And of course we can help because they've got the private healthcare is they can avail of that, and they're also very. We work with a company called Peppy in the UK who provide basically like online support for women, but also for family members of our employees to be able to go and access that and literally have a clinician in their pocket. It's not a bot, it's a clinician that you're talking to. So, we've been able to put many of our male executives and many of our men in touch, get their wives to get in touch with Peppy through that route. So it's been really good.
I think when I think about the businesses that I've worked in and the scenarios in which this would, show up, one of the things that I feel is at a minimum is just trying to bring awareness to the men that are in the organization. They don't have to be experts in this. They don't have to, they just have to have awareness. Because I'm picturing a scenario where, there's a team, let's say it's a team of 5, and the manager of that team happens to be a man, and one of his team members, a woman, seems to be distant, seems to be, maybe she's late to meetings, maybe she's not participating, maybe she seems like she's struggling, any of the number of things that you could see. And the challenge that I think we have to solve for is having that manager, having that leader go directly to a performance issue.
Yeah.
Go directly to blaming her for not showing up, blaming her or judging her performance based upon these things that we know, based upon hormonal loss, is out of her control. And if there was just enough awareness for that manager to understand, oh, this might be because of this.
Yeah.
It's not to say that he, has to approach her about it, right? She could talk to HR, he could talk to HR, but just an understanding is, I think, such a big solution here. And that's what that's why Lawrence and I love talking to men, because we understand how far simply awareness can take men in this conversation. Are you seeing that at Accenture as well?
Absolutely, we are. And whilst you were talking, I thought, oh, I've got the perfect story for this. So literally 2 weeks ago, I got an email from a gentleman who said, I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for the incredible work you're doing with the Menopause Awareness Initiative and the MenoWarriors group. It's been truly transformative for me, and I would love to share a recent experience. I was in a discussion with a colleague of mine who was facing several challenges, including forgetting words, low energy levels, difficulty in recalling information, where she felt inadequate and unfit to perform. To cope with these issues, she'd been doing all sorts of things to help herself, etc., etc. But thanks to your insightful video on menopause, I was able to understand and empathise with what she was going through. And your explanation of brain fog, including the classic example of your own experience, provided me with the knowledge and the confidence to address this sensitive topic with her at what is right now our performance period of the year, right? So, and he said, this newfound understanding has not only helped me support my colleague, but has also had a positive impact on my personal life. My wife is proud I can relate to her natural changes, and our relationship has grown stronger. I mean,
amazing.
I can't, that for me, I got that email and I nearly burst into tears because I was like, that is exactly, and I think that's what you're talking about, Jesse. It's if you talk about it, you signpost, you show people where there are resources and what he literally joined the dots when this one of his team members was having these problems, and he was like, I know what that is, or I know what it might be, so I'm going to go and see if it is, and that for me is the holy grail, right?
Sarah, we get comments because Jesse and I both got quite active TikTok accounts, and we get a lot of comments, and the majority are very positive. We do get some negative comments as well, and I got one yesterday, and this woman said, well, he says he loves me, but he won't open up to me, he won't talk to me. And one of the things that we find, Jesse and I find, is so often with couples, you get couples who are very strong communicators. They can talk about everything. They can talk about money, they can talk about sex, they can talk about menopause.
Yep.
But you also get couples who can't. You get couples that can't talk about sex, can't talk about money, can't talk about menopause. And I think there might be more couples like that than the other way. So, I said to this woman, well, just because you might possibly be rolling your eyes, or you might possibly be talking down to him, or he's got his guards up because he thinks you're holding out on him, or whatever it might be, but you haven't explained yourself. And that's where Jesse and I come in, and it's so much stronger because we can take all the emotion out. So if a guy's turning around and going, well, she won't have sex with me, if we can explain to him the reasons she's not having sex with him, we're not saying it from an emotive point of view. So straight away he now goes, I didn't know it was hurting her.
Right. I heard you.
Yeah, and now I'm starting to understand. And as you say, they start joining the dots.
Yeah.
Now they become a little bit more cautious. They turn up with more empathy. They start asking questions. Is this hurting? Is this not hurting? Are we doing it right? Am I, they start to understand. We're not here, and we say this to women all the time, we are not here to try and fix anyone.
No.
That is not our intention. All we're trying to do is point the men to a little bit more information so that they can turn up, and most importantly, they're going to believe what you're saying to them.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast too, and I like the way you talked about how you put this stuff into man speak in terms that they would understand. I was like, that's perfect, because if you start talking to men about menopause from a woman's perspective, it's a bit blah, right? But the minute you put it in their terms, and it changes something. There's a really good book in the UK. You'll know Davina McCall Lawrence. She wrote a book, Menopausing, and it's brilliant. It's like she tells a story when she launched the book about how she about a gentleman who wanted to it was the other way around. He wanted to talk to his wife because he thought she was menopausal and she wouldn't talk about it. So Davina said, buy the book, throw the book at her, and then let's see what happens. And honestly, it changed their relationship. So I mean, you guys, what you two are doing is absolutely phenomenal. We try in MenoWarriors to get groups of men to come together and talk about this stuff. It's not as successful as getting all the women together, but the joint conversations that we do have are incredibly powerful and much needed in the workplace. But we're finding that we're actually helping more men, less with their teams, but more with their own personal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that's such an amazing point. And Lawrence brought it up earlier, which is everything from home comes to work.
Yeah.
Everything. Right? So whether it's your emotions, your anxiety, your depression, your excitement, your happiness, your sadness, your physical feelings, all of it is there. And what I think is so important to try to get across to men is by talking about this, by understanding this, you're improving your own life, right? You're helping. Like, do you to put it in the man speak? It's like, okay, you want to be the hero? Learn a little bit about menopause.
Yeah.
And see what happens, right? Yeah. If that's your thing, if you've got if you want to be seen as like a great husband, a great father, any of those things, I got something for you. Just take 5 minutes and learn something about menopause and watch what happens. Yeah. It's, I did a post on my TikTok channel that Lawrence was referring to. And it did well on my channel. It got a couple million views. And then Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Do you know Dr. Mary Claire Haver?
No.
Okay, so she's written a book. She talks a lot about it. She has her socials. She's got a few million followers. Out of nowhere, she posted my video on her Instagram and collabed with me. And it got 1 million views on the first day, 1 million views on the second day. and thousands of comments. And my point is, if you go through the comments from a man's perspective, what you will see is an overwhelmingly positive response saying, great, thank you. Thank you for learning about this. Thank you for talking about this. Please tell another man about this, right? It's almost the one area, right, where men can really broach like a sensitive topic, a sensitive piece of a woman's life, and be widely accepted to do it. And if we can just help men understand that in a very short amount of time, they can make a big difference for themselves, for their relationships, for their work life. It's incredible.
It is. And what's amazing is when you do talk to I've talked to my brother-in-laws about this, and they've come to me and said, we don't have a policy at work. And then they'll come and tell me all these anecdotes of the things that they've done as a result of, and all of the positive things that have happened as a result of them having a policy, or understanding, or feeling able to have the conversation, having the vocabulary, feeling equipped to be able to have that conversation with some of their female staff at work. They've just said it's been genuinely game-changing for them in the workplace, and in our family now with my sisters, and we all talk about it all the time. My kids are very well equipped to deal with it. I have a boy, I have a girl, both of them, they've not had much choice but to hear it and see it and, and learn about it. But equipping that next generation, and the fact that you guys are on TikTok is awesome, because you are, I'd love there to be a day where we don't need MenoWarriors, because it's just an accepted conversation. It's everybody understands it. It's a part of life. It affects 50% of the population directly, the other 50% indirectly. We all just need to understand it, accept it, and deal with it, right?
100%. And I think, Sarah, what you guys have done with MenoWarriors is fantastic, and congratulations to you guys. And the law in the UK is changing, corporate law, policies, if you employ more than 250 people, policies are coming into play that you've got to have your menopause policy. But too many companies don't do what you guys do. They write a policy and they stick it in the file, and it's there alongside the safety policy. But now there's a need for an action plan. That if another corporate had to say to you guys, it's easy for you guys, Sarah, you're 50-50 male-female split, you've got 775,000 employees, you're doing $65 billion in turnover, easy for you guys, you can deploy capital. What would you say to them, around this whole ROI around menopause?
Look, when Jill, Lee and I started the MenoWarriors back in 2019, there was no budget, there was no funding, there was no, it was like, we're just going to crack on and do this. And we did. And it started with a couple of Teams calls with coffee and cake and chatting. And that was it. That really was the extent of it. I don't think you need big budgets and all the rest of it, because even if we'd asked for it, we probably wouldn't have got it, right? So we kind of went a little bit under the radar because we knew it was the right thing to do. So we just used the contacts and the connects, and we just started on day one, and it grew. And it's when you get the groundswell of momentum, and when other people start talking about it, that's when other stuff starts. So it's not about, the size of your organization. Many of the organizations that are menopause-friendly accredited, they are not huge organizations. Many of them are very, very small. And the organizations that both of my brother-in-laws work for, very small. But they just wanted to do something. And we don't have a specific policy. We've integrated process into all of our main health and wellbeing policies, so that we are signposting menopause everywhere we go, and it's built into everyday things, like just a simple when you have your sort of table chair check to make sure that if you need some kind of adjustment. It's even built into that, the ability to ask for a fan if you want a fan. The fact that we now have a Wellbeing room. So if you are perimenopause, whatever your need might be, there's a place to go and decompress if you are having a hot flush or you just need some time out. So we've just managed through momentum and working with other teams, not in splendid isolation, working with, I mean, this is the other point, right? It's so intersectional, is menopause. It affects, so we've got all these different ERG groups, accent on ethnicity, or the way menopause affects Africans, Indians, is different. The symptoms are different. The onset of menopause is different. There's the whole LGBTQ question. And if you were born female, if you are two females in a relationship together, what's menopause like for you? And now increasingly there's the neurodiversity angle. How neurodiversity and neurodiverse brains can be massively impacted by menopause, by the symptoms, because of the estrogen impact on the brain. So we found that rather than being our own ERG, we sit almost as a horizontal, and we work with all of them to try and make things better for everybody. So, and of course, the mental health side of things as well. But given that anxiety is, I think, the number one symptom that most people present with when they go to their GP or their doctor.
I'm going to throw another one in there, Sarah. In 2 weeks' time, I'll send you the link when it's done. We have a dentist coming on to tell us how menopause impacts oral health.
Oh, wow.
And it is fascinating.
Oh, wow. Okay. I will definitely be listening to that one.
Yeah, burning mouth syndrome. I remember when I did a TikTok on burning mouth syndrome, because estrogen is responsible for the amount of moisture in your skin. It affects salivary glands and the neurosystem in that area. So your nerves start to misfire, and you can get that. Basically, it's like having sciatica in your mouth, and you talk to, and this brings me to what I wanted to talk about here is menopause. For me as a man, learning about this has felt like just one thing on top of the other. It starts with mood swings and hot flashes, and you're like, okay, got it, I understand menopause. And then you learn about the next thing, and the insomnia, and then the brain fog, and then the memory loss, and then the frozen shoulder, and then the weight gain, and then and it just seems to not stop. And it's so incredible to then think, because you mentioned it earlier, there's a period of time in a survey I was reading, it said the height by salary of a woman's career is 44. And the average perimenopausal range, we know that it starts in early 30s, but I think this study was saying right around 40 to 44.
Yeah.
So leading into the height of her career, she's starting to hit all of these symptoms, right? And peaking literally at the height of her career. But then they have, I think the average age for empty nesters was something like 49. So now, in this 6-year period, you've peaked with your career. You've been struggling through all these symptoms the whole way. You're then dealing with the grief and often depression and anxiety that comes with being an empty nester, right? And then I think it was the age of 50 was when the average age when a woman has lost at least one of her parents.
Yeah.
And so through that, if you picture, and this is why I think context is so important for men, right? Versus just talking about the symptoms, because that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But just, I try to reach men either saying estrogen is like oil in your car, and when it runs low, your car doesn't run well, right? Like, I'll try that path. Right? Lawrence and I try to talk to men that way. We'll try to talk to men a little bit more scientifically. We'll talk to them about, estrogen and testosterone and progesterone and the effects on the brain and the body. And then sometimes you just have to say, can you just follow me for a second and picture this 6-year period for a woman, taking care of her elderly parents, taking care of kids in high school, having the kids leave the house, having all of these symptoms build up, and being at the height of her career. I mean, are you going to argue with me on that? That's got to be one of them. And sometimes you try to just hit men that way, right? So I guess my question for you is, as MenoWarriors talk, especially to men, what angle do you feel works? Because we're trying to solve this puzzle to get men to understand this. Have you found anything that resonates?
I mean, what we try not to do is kind of tell. It's really hard because in the work context that we are, it makes it quite difficult. I mean, one of the things I will be doing is posting links to your podcast, so to the men, so that we'll go on our site. It will say, right, you've got to go and listen to this stuff, because in the work context, trying to find some of those angles is quite challenging, and what one man needs is different to another. We do run some pretty. There are some sessions that we've run, particularly with our male sponsor, who is very, very open and very much like you guys will talk about absolutely anything. But we've still got, I think we've still got a way to go to really engage the men in the way that I'd really like to. I think what you just described is what a couple of my colleagues in the UK, not my colleagues, but friends in my sort of menopause network, Dr. Lucy Ryan and Emma Thomas, have coined as the midlife collision, which is very, very real. Everything you've just described there happened to me, is happening to other women. It's real. It's really hard when you're trying to have a stellar career. Think about your aging parents. You've either got kids in high school, or they, as they were in my case, both of my children both left home on the exact same day in 2021. And it was tough, really, really tough. And I'm still going through all the things I need to do to kind of really get on top of my menopause symptoms. But when you do come through the other side of that, wow, it's what, and that's the bit, and maybe we link that back to what you were saying earlier. I am a far better employee than I was in 2019, 2020, because I now understand, I've taken the steps I need to take to replace the estrogen, the progesterone, the testosterone. I have discovered that weight training is just so perfect for me, and I have I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with a personal trainer who is working with me for what I need. It's not about muscle Sarah. It's all about doing the right things for the parts of my body that need the focus, and just finding the right doctor who is not just going to prescribe the holy trinity of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, but is also saying, have you thought about vitamin D? You might have been in India for 18 months, Sarah, and you'll have had plenty of vitamin D, but you're back in the UK now. Go and get yourself a bumper pack of vitamin D, because you need it, because you're not getting the sunshine on your shoulders anymore that you used to get, right? So go do that, help yourself. And so it's that constant education and re-education of yourself, and doing things to help yourself.
So I know I'm very aware of your time. I just wanted to say one thing to you. We recently put out a survey because we believe it's all about conversation between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
And we went to a couple who he understands. He's been very empathetic to his wife's menopause. She's got menopause. They're both 50-ish.
Yeah.
And we gave them we said, could you on a Friday night pour a glass of wine, sit at the table, everyone out the house, make it a date night, get your wife to fill in a survey, and then the same very questions, you fill in the same survey, and then swap the surveys and see if your English is the same. It was completely and utterly eye-opening.
Wow. That sounds
they went through, he'd have like hot sweats and something else, and she would put something and something, and then he'd go, no, but you're only struggling with this because you've got a deficit of vitamins, and you don't eat vegetables, and it was fascinating how they were both on the same level but on totally different parameters, completely and utterly in a different direction.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. It's because I think that there's also what men will pick up from the media about menopause, and unfortunately, it is the anecdotal, it is the hot flush, it is this, it's not the depth, and that's why your podcast is so important, because it it literally opens the box on everything menopause, and you articulate it in a way that men will understand it. Because I think that is part of the problem. It is, we get it, and we as girlfriends will talk to each other, and we almost are, we're almost psychic about it. We know what we're all going to say about it. It's just not the same with men, I don't think, and we just need to. It's just about providing the information and in such a way that you can consume it.
I think that's so well put. And I, as Lawrence mentioned, we're coming to the end of time here. So let me just share something that I think is so impactful about the reality we're facing here with menopause in the workplace. A Mayo Clinic study, I believe in 2023, said that the average days missed per year for a woman because of menopausal symptoms is 3. So multiply that times the number of women in an organization, and imagine, right, the loss of productivity. They quantify that at $1.8 billion dollars per year lost. On top of that, and this is where it gets really crazy, when they also took into account the medical costs, it soared to $26.6 billion in cost. So this was a Mayo Clinic study saying, if that doesn't wake up companies, if that doesn't wake up the leaders of companies and help companies understand, this is one reason. It is not the only reason to talk about this, but this is a big reason to talk about it. And then the other big reason to talk about this is the welfare of your team members and how they show up, and what they bring to work, and what they bring to the culture, and what they bring emotionally to and their motivation and the passion that they want to put into their job. All of it is affected by menopause. This is something that we absolutely have to talk about, and we have to talk about it in the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. The economic business case for doing something is compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Very compelling.
Sarah, you have been amazing, and thank you. We're now through 45 minutes, so thank you very much. Hopefully we can extend you another invitation and get you back on here for another podcast, and we would love to have you back on again. So thank you very much. Really appreciate all the kind words, and it's been fascinating to listen to you.
Thank you, Sarah.
No, thank you. Thank you both.